Hello everyone, I'm Zain Mustafa, and today we're going to be looking at a brief presentation that I've put together on the cultural history of Pakistan, looking at about 5,000 years of its architectural heritage in a very short span of time. So let's get started. To understand the cultural history of Pakistan through its man-made architecture, one must understand its geographical location, which has given this strip of land its appeal over the centuries. Through two doorways in the mighty Himalayan mountain range, the Khyber Pass in the north and the Bolan Pass in the south, it is a funnel-like gateway, two narrow and challenging openings to bring one from the west into the exotic Orient. Through the Khyber Pass heading directly south, the Central Asian countries and Russia have access to the warm waters of the Indian Ocean and a natural harbor of the rich Orient. Carefully nestled on the eastern side of the Himalayas, along the river Indus, is one of the oldest civilizations in the world. The 2,500-year-old Indus Valley civilization sits at the very threshold of the exotic. One has to pass through this rich history before moving further east. Needless to say, due to these unique characteristics, this region has attracted marauders over the centuries. On arrival, these expanding empires explored, discovered, traded with, and eventually colonized the East, very swiftly setting up bases here. Some stayed for a few decades, others for centuries. Thanks to the exposure to the outside world, from Mohenjo-daro to an independent, democratic, modern Pakistan, there is a diverse and rich series of cultural memoirs that have been left behind and have become a part of our identity, a part of our culture, a part of our blood, a part of who we are even today. Historically, this identity is not restricted to a mere modern political boundary or religion. This complex and dense layering can be seen most clearly throughout our architectural heritage. Pakistan's major and most profound landmarks can be categorized in four genres: forts, mausoleums, shrines, spiritual sanctuaries, and public service government buildings. Let's start our brief journey through the architectural history of young Pakistan with the most unexpected of spaces. Takht-e-Bahi, dated to the 1st century BC in Mardan, was first a Zoroastrian complex, which after the arrival of Buddhism was converted into a Buddhist monastic complex. There are four main areas of the Takht-e-Bahi complex: the stupa court, a cluster of stupas located in a central courtyard; the monastic chambers, consisting of individual cells arranged around a courtyard, assembly halls, and a dining area; a temple complex consisting of stupas and similar to the stupa court but of later construction; the tantric monastic complex, which consists of small dark cells with low openings which may have been used for certain forms of tantric meditation. Additional structures on the site may have served as residences or meeting halls, or filled secular purposes. All of the buildings on the site are constructed from a local stone and are mortared with lime and mud. The ancient Gandhara capital, Taxila, dating back to 2500 BC, was situated at the pivotal junction of India, Western Asia and Central Asia. Owing to its strategic location, Taxila changed hands many times over the centuries, with many empires vying for its control. When the great ancient trade routes connecting those regions ceased to be important, the city sank into insignificance and was finally destroyed by the nomadic Huns in the 5th century. By some accounts, Taxila was considered to be amongst the earliest universities in the world. Within the Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappan culture, Taxila had a more famous sibling, Mohenjo-daro, an archaeological site in the province of Sindh. Built around 2600 BC, it was one of the largest settlements of the ancient Indus Valley civilization and one of the world's earliest major urban settlements, on par with the civilizations of ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Crete. At its height, the Indus civilization spanned much of what is now Pakistan and North India, extending westwards to the Iranian border, south to Gujarat in India, and northwards to an outpost in Bactria. Mohenjo-daro was the most advanced city of its time, with remarkably sophisticated civil engineering and urban planning. When the Indus civilization went into sudden decline around 1900 BC, Mohenjo-daro was abandoned. The Indus Valley civilization had its earliest roots in cultures such as that of Mehergarh, approximately 6000 BC. Much older, much older. The two greatest cities, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, emerged about 2500 BC along the Indus River in Punjab and Sindh. The civilization had developed a writing system, urban centers, and even a diversified social and economic structure. Talking about connections trickling in through the mountains in the north down to central Indus River region, we can take a break and change genres to look at the world's largest fort at Ranikot. This silent, majestic 26-kilometer-long giant sits elegantly amongst austere landscapes at the foothills of the Keithar range of hills and appears out of nowhere as one approaches it, a 45-minute drive off the main highway. Even today, 25 centuries have done little to diminish its unmatched grace or take away from its breathtaking construction and architectural history. Some historians believe that Ranikot was first built about 325 BC by the Indo-Scythians. The Great Wall of China, by the way, was built in 206 BC. There is clearly a direct influence that can be seen in Ranikot's construction that may have happened over the years between the two due to trade of the Scythian Empire that stretched all the way from Central Asia to China. The Scythians are mentioned in Greek literature too. So if we think about it, here in Ranikot, we have Central Asian and Russian history connected to early Chinese history and documented through stories of love, battles, and cultures in Greek literature, just as Homer and his peers wrote of Troy. Talking of storytelling, one has to touch upon the Sufi culture and shrines dotted all across the country. But the most famous, Qawwalis and Dhamals, can be heard and seen at Lal Shahbaz Qalandar's shrine in Sevan near Ranikot. Shahbaz Qalandar was born in modern-day Afghanistan. He spent a major portion of his life traveling the then Muslim world, eventually settling in Sevan in 1251. His dedication to the knowledge about various religious disciplines enabled him to become a profound scholar. It is noteworthy that many saints of Sindh, including Shah Abdul Latif Pitai, Makhdoom Bilawal and Sachal Sarmast, were all followers of Hazrat Lal Shahbaz Qalandar. The shrine around his tomb was built in 1356 and decorated with Sindhi Kashi tiles, mirrorwork. A gold-plated door was donated by the late Shah of Iran, Raza Shah Pahlavi. The inner sanctum is about 100 square yards with a silver canopied grave in the middle. Heading further south, when one looks at the first great city Mohenjo-daro, one has to also look at its descendant, Thatta. Thatta may be the site of ancient Patala, the main port on the Indus in the time of Alexander the Great. The city, formerly commanding the delta of the Indus, was the capital of Lower Sindh from the 14th century onwards. During the ruling period of the Sama dynasty, Thatta was the capital of Sindh for 95 years. Between 1592 and 1739, it was governed in the name of the Mughal emperors of Delhi. In 1739, however, following the Battle of Karnal, the province was ceded to Nadir Shah of Persia, after which Thatta fell into neglect as the Indus River started to silt up. On the outskirts of Thatta is Makli, one of the largest necropolises in the world, almost 4 kilometers long. It is a burial place of some 125,000 local rulers, Sufi saints, and others. The tombs and gravestones spread over the cemetery are material documents marking the social and political history of Sindh. Many have been built using a local sandstone, others are plastered brick buildings, which have suffered the most generally. The impressive royal mausoleums are divided into two major groups, those from the 14th century Sama and those from the 16th century Tarkhan period. In total, 4 historical periods are represented architecturally, namely the Sama, the Arghun, the Tarkhan, and the Mughals periods. Moving on from the Mughals in Makli to the Mughals in the Punjab, the Rohtas fort, for instance, was built in the 16th century by Mughal conqueror Sher Shah Suri to subdue the rebellious tribes of the northern Punjab region. Taking 8 years to build, this garrison fort could house a force of up to 30,000 men. Due to its location, massive walls, trap gates, and 3 baulis, deep stepwells, it was built to withstand a major siege, although it was never besieged. Most of the fort was built with ashlar stones from surrounding villages. Strategically, some parts of the fort were built by bricks. The fort is irregular in shape and follows the contours of the hill it was constructed on. The fort is exactly 5.2 kilometers in circumference. A 533-meter long wall divides the citadel from other parts of the fort. The fortification has 68 bastions at irregular intervals. Out of the 3 baulis, one of them is in the citadel and the rest are in other parts of the fort. One of the gates opens into the citadel and is a trap gate because it is in the direct line of fire from the bastions. An offshoot of our Mughal heritage, the Kalhoras ruled Sindh from 1701 to 1783. They were assigned to hold authority by the Mughal Grand Vizier Mirza Ghazi Beg and later formed their own dynasty, but they were known as the Kalhora Nawabs by the Mughal emperors. Connected very closely to the Kalhoras were the Talpurs. The Talpurs were Balochis. They were invited by the ruling Kalhoras to help them organize unruly Baloch tribes living in Sindh. The Talpurs who spoke Sindhi settled in northern Sindh. Very soon their descendants and allies formed a confederacy against the Kalhora dynasty. The Talpurs soon gained power and overthrew the Kalhoras. Peace between the 2 warring tribes was soon established in 1783. The Talpur dynasty ruled from 1783 to 1843 until they were overthrown by the British East India Company. In 1858, the East India Company was dissolved and the administration of India became the responsibility of the Crown. Between 1857 and the subcontinent's independence from British rule in 1947, there are a multitude of British colonial buildings that were built. A unique form of architecture was developed, appropriate for the region's climate and cultural values, inspired by the styles of the times in England. Over time, after the 1947 partition and creation of Pakistan, as travel to the West for education became affordable and popular, returning graduates either practiced the profession or brought the curricula to local universities, Pakistan began learning from the modern masters like Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe, and architecture started navigating its way away from the colonial and into a global modern language. Even the old US consulate building in Karachi can lay claim to being the only building in this part of the world designed by famous architect Richard Neutra. The search through evolution, trial and error continues as one sees an overall desire to discover a single identity for this young nation. The architecture is reflective of this instability and lack of direction. It will take time, no doubt, and it needs to go through this time of design unsurety before ultimately a language of architecture unique to Pakistan emerges. Well, I hope you enjoyed that brief glimpse into the architectural history of Pakistan and that you take away from it a sense of how much more there is to Pakistan than meets the eye. Until next time, thank you for watching.